So Kat and I, we did our next marathon over the weekend, which was Indiana Jones. As it turns out, she's actually never seen an entire Indiana Jones film before. I think she said she'd just seen a little of like one of them. And I was like, oh, because she's a big film gal. So I was like, maybe we could watch this, because I don't know, I figured she might enjoy them. So just over the course of like 2 days, we watched all of them. It's only 4 movies, so much easier and less exhausting than Fast and Furious. And it was also nice because I'd seen every Indiana Jones film before, but I hadn't seen any of them in a really long time. Like, I had this friend, this childhood friend, who had a bunch of movies, so whenever I went over to his house, for like a sleepover, or just, to have like a play date that went late or whatever, we'd like watch a movie, and then that was just, I think over the course of that, I just, of our friendship, I'd watched every Indiana Jones movie at his house. But my memory of them was honestly it's kind of funny, more informed by the Lego game. I had Lego Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It's kind of weird. They did like a Lego Indiana Jones for the first 3 movies, and then Crystal Skull, I think, separately. That was a little odd. But there's like a bunch of homages to or like mini games and things and extra content for the other movies. It's sort of weird, but I don't know. I thought it was fun. I had a fun time with it when I was a kid. Yeah, those movies are good. I guess the broad thing I would say is that everyone kind of knows Crystal Skull isn't that great. I don't hate Crystal Skull that much. I feel kind of indifferent towards it. I think the big cat hated it. She thought it was garbage. And I'm not that harsh. I think Kat has she has I feel like if Kat doesn't like something, she hates it. Like, she doesn't have a very wide middle ground. So like, if something is not like, if she doesn't outright like it, she just like, man, that fucking sucked ass. I have more of like it's inoffensive to me. I think the worst thing that I could say about it is that I don't really know why it exists. Like, I get that it's maybe we could get a next generation of Indiana Jones, but it as like a film, as like a standalone thing, it's like, why was this made? It just feels like another Indiana Jones movie. Why did it have to exist? It's not significantly better. It doesn't like really push stuff like the series forward. I guess it's sort of trying to, but I mean like as a whole, I don't know. When I imagine going back and pulling a series out of obscurity, or out of the past, right? I would want something like Doom 2016, right? Like something that's like, oh shit, there was a very good reason to bring Doom back. They didn't just make the original kind of vision for Doom 4, if you kind of know about the behind the scenes of that game, it was just kind of a generic military shooter with demons, and they were like, why are we doing this? They literally said, like, does anyone on the team even want this game? Or are we just doing this because that's the thing to do? And then they completely scrapped it from the ground up. It's like, okay, there's a very good reason why you would do that. And most people are happy with that, right? Indiana Jones feels like if Doom 4 had come out instead of Doom 2016, right? Crystal Skull, that's what that feels like. Also, it has a lot of CG, like CG environments, which makes the movie feel weirdly soft. Like, a lot of the scenes with all the CG stuff looks really just has this weird softness to it, and I don't know, it doesn't have it loses the kind of some of the grit in the originals, having watched them back to back. I guess the best part, and the part that Kat liked the most too, was Cate Blanchett as a very attractive Russian woman in somewhat form-fitting clothing. Also, I don't hate Shia LaBeouf. I never quite understood the hate for Shia LaBeouf. Like, I honestly, I even asked, like, Kat fucking hates Shia LaBeouf. Every time he spoke, she was, like, rolling around. And I was like, what do you hate about him? She just kind of said, like, oh, he overacts. I just don't like him. I never understood all of the hatred for him. He just seems fine. I feel like there's much worse actors. Is that what people don't like about him? Because he's like, I don't know, because he's fine? I don't know, I never got it. I'm also, again, I'm a lot more forgiving on stuff. For me, a thing in general, not just a movie, but just a thing has to actively, like, annoy me. Like, it has to kind of piss me off for me to dislike it, right? Like I think actually a good example is our differing opinions on, like, the Fast and Furious movies, where I'm like, yeah, Tokyo Drift's fine. And because Kat was not particularly entertained by it, she goes, yeah, it kind of sucks dick. Like, okay, but Fate of the Furious actively annoyed me. Like, it made me upset and bothered, and that's why I don't like it. And I think she just thinks it's fine, funny enough. Yeah, the first 3 movies, getting on to the positive stuff, yeah, those movies are great. Honestly, going back and rewatching Raiders of the Lost Ark, I don't know, I feel like it might be my least favorite. And I don't mean that, and not to say it's bad at all. I think Raiders of the Lost Ark was probably really cool when it came out. Because it was sort of a throwback, right? It was a throwback to, like, 50s sort of adventure serials, right? Like, kind of like Star Wars was trying to do. George Lucas was going for that same vibe. And it hits that really hard in a way that I can totally see. I can almost imagine that it's... Maybe this is a bad example, but it's kind of almost similar to, like, when Iron Man came out. It was like, oh, this thing that people are kind of aware of, but people don't really make, right? Oh, you know, superhero movies, yeah, people try to do them, but they're very good. And then Iron Man comes out, and it's a pretty good movie, right? It's a pretty crowd-pleasing, fun movie. It's a solid all around, I guess. It's good as a movie. Where, Jesus, why is my mic tuned so high? When did that happen? Alright. Hopefully this is less, so hopefully I'm peaking less now. I just noticed how high it was tuned in Audacity. Right, yeah, I feel like that's the kind of thing that Indiana Jones had. But you also had the bonus of, this is Harrison Ford, hot off of Star Wars, George Lucas, hot off of Star Wars, Steven Spielberg, John Williams, also, like, now a big name. Like, it was the perfect storm. Like, there's no world in which Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark was not a huge hit, just based off of hype from the names attached to it, right? Like, holy shit, you gotta go see it. On top of the fact that it's a good movie. It's good, and there isn't much beyond just, yeah, it's a fun adventure flick. Indiana Jones is, like, he's a cool protagonist. Almost James Bond-like, I guess, is in like all the different facets. Like, he's very cultured, he's an intellectual, he's like physically athletic, he has combat skills, he's kind of a ladies' man, which they kind of touch more on in the later movies, but you kind of, like, infer it, right? He's got this spurned love in Marion. That stuff's it's all fun. It's a very straightforward, classical, throwback kind of action adventure movie, and it's pretty good at it. Great, some really nice special effects, especially in the very famous scene with the Ark. Yeah, I don't know. It's good. It's really hard to say anything other than it's just very well executed at what it's trying to do. Temple of Doom is a little weird. Temple of Doom is weird. I do like it, actually. I know that it's... I thought I could have sworn Temple of Doom was the third one, but actually it's the second. For years I thought that it was the third one, but no. I still think it's good. I know it's probably the most disliked of those original 3. I think the biggest problems it has is it's kind of tonally weird, like tonally dissonant. Some parts of it, like that opening scene, feels like really goofy, like much more lighthearted. Like the first movie was it was, I guess, lighthearted in the sense that, like, it wasn't super gritty, or like dark. I wouldn't say it was dark, right? Not too intense. It was still like a fun adventure film. The opening feels way more like leaning into that, where it's like Indiana Jones has this little scuffle with these, I think, Chinese guys, and then he drops into a car driven by his tiny Asian boy sidekick, Shortstop, and Shortstop says, "Hold on to your potatoes, Dr. Jones." And it's like, okay, this is like a kid's film, and then there's some, everyone knows about this in the middle, some pretty dark stuff, right? Like someone's heart getting ripped out, which honestly wasn't as gory as I recall it being. Actually, wasn't quite as bad as I remember it being. As a kid. But like that's just super dark. That's super intense. There's that whole sequence of Indy being like brainwashed. That just like, I don't know. It feels really dark, Human sacrifice and things like that. And then it gets, but there's like this weird clashing, goofy stuff. It almost feels a little, I don't know. Feels a little confused. Like I don't know if they had to go quite so hard in all of those ways. I don't think it's bad overall. It actually, like, the third act, I think, is great. The middle sags a bit for me. But I think like, everything kind of from the time that they get captured to... Honestly, like, yeah, where the third act starts, where, like, what is it? Everything with the minecart, the whole bridge thing, that's all great. I love that. Some bits in the middle that kind of, just kind of like, okay. I'm also like not a huge, I don't know, it was like, okay, well I know Indy's gonna snap out of it and stuff, and like, I don't know. Just, that part wasn't super compelling for me. I didn't have any serious reservations about, oh my god, is Willie going to die? Oh, I like Willie too. I think Kat really liked Temple of Doom, specifically because she loves her blonde bimbo characters, and Willie is such that. She is such an extreme that, and she's, and I like her. I think she's funny. She's kind of cute, and like how freaked out she is by everything. I kind of enjoy that dynamic where, oh my god, she's kind of incensed at how what she has to put up with. And what's so funny is that Kat had so many moments where she was relating to Willie. There's this scene where Indy and Shortstop are in that room, and the crusher, like the spiked ceiling is coming down, and Willie has to walk through this whole like cave of insects and reach her hand through this hole that's just swarming with like centipedes and spiders and wriggly creepy crawlies, to pull a lever to stop the ceiling from crushing them. And Kat hates bugs. She has a big bug phobia. And we were watching this scene, and we were both really tensed up, right? And I realized, and I confirmed this with Kat, I was scared for Indy and Shortstop. Kat was scared for Willie. I was concerned. I'm like, oh my god, they're so close to getting crushed. And Kat was like, oh my god, she has to touch a bug. Eek. Overall, a fun movie. Also, it's got that weird... Okay, that's the other thing about Temple of Doom. That's the one where people are like, uh-oh, the racial stuff's a little odd. Now, like, okay, the villains are scary Indians. This could be fine. It doesn't have to be bad. And I'm not an expert. I'm not Indian, right? I'm not an expert on what is offensive to Indians. I'm pretty sure it hits a point where it's like, okay, I don't think that I'm pretty sure all that stuff about Indians, like, eating monkey brains and stuff is, like, not really true. It definitely feels a little... That's probably the most dated part about it, is like, this kind of feels like what someone who has a vague idea of Indian culture thinks Indian people were like in the 1950s. whatever, early 40s, I think this takes place in. Yeah, there was nothing that stood out to me as especially egregious. Like they are like evil Indian people. It's not that Indian people are evil; they're just evil. So I don't know. I'm not an expert on that, and it wasn't enough to hurt my enjoyment of the movie fully. It's not like Live Wire bad, That's the one, right? That's the one with the brown face guy. It's not like that bad where you're like, okay, everyone kind of knows. It's not Justin Trudeau bad. Yeah. And then honestly, I think Last Crusade is my favorite. I think it's my favorite one. It has, so I think the thing that helps it the most is that it's the one that has character development. Oh yeah, I totally forgot about this. There's just upfront references to sex in Temple of Doom. That was maybe another weird thing, is that it feels like, oh, this is a kid's adventure movie or a more family friendly adventure movie, and then they just have upfront references to sex where Indiana Jones is gonna he's flirting super hard, they're about to fuck, and and he talks about what is it, studying nocturnal behaviors or something like that, and then they think they just say sexual behaviors or something like that, and it's I guess it was the 80s, you could do that. I don't know, it seemed again tonally dissonant. I think as a kid, all that stuff went way over my head. I did not know what was happening in those scenes. That would just go over most children's heads, which I think is fine if it's something in the background, but to make it the focus of a scene, children literally don't understand what's happening. Children who don't have a concept of sex don't know what's happening in the scene. Obviously adults will, but that's where it feels weird, right? Last Crusade. Last Crusade has character development, which is cool, which is nice. The first two movies are just kind of the characters are just kind of as is, which is fine. I don't think that's a negative. The characters are as is. They exist in the movie. Indiana Jones is fun to watch. The characters he interacts with are usually fun to watch. They perform functions, and the functions are good. Last Crusade actually kind of Indiana Jones. Yeah, he kind of changes a little bit by the end. You could sort of infer that, but mainly it's his dad. So Sean Connery playing the senior Henry Jones is great. Well, he's Sean Connery, so he's a great actor. But he's such a good casting. He's such a good casting because you can imagine that if it was, this is kind of what's genius about it. If it was made back in the Sean Connery Sean Connery James Bond days, Sean Connery could have been Indiana Jones. That's what's I compared him to James Bond, totally not thinking about that. But Connery has, he can play that kind of character so well, right? And there's these little references, right, to he's definitely he's not as much of a rugged kind of guy as our Indy Jones, right? But he fulfills some of those quotas. I thought it was great, the little reference they made to the fact that Henry Jones Sr. is absolutely slinging that DILF dick around. He totally that's such a great line. He's like, "How did you know she was a Nazi?" "She talks in her sleep." And Harrison Ford's face is so good. He's like, "You fuck! Oh my god! You can't believe it." He's like, "Oops. Might have just been a little silver fox, a little irresistible older gentleman." That's great. That was fun. The dynamic between them is really cool. It's one you don't see too often. Estranged. Well, actually, you do. What am I trying to think of? I feel like you don't see it as much. I feel like you see like an estranged parent-child relationship a lot more with like mothers and daughters for some reason. Maybe I'm just pulling that out of my ass, but I don't know. I thought it was the dynamic they had was interesting, where they didn't have some big falling out, right? It's just that Indy recognizes that his dad was kind of absent because his dad is just the way he is. He's just the way he is. He's more interested in his work than his son, and he sees nothing wrong with that. He says like, "Oh, I made you self-reliant, and these are all good traits." And you can totally see how he rationalizes not spending a lot of time with his son. And Indy, like, I doubt he, like, as a character, regrets the way that he came out, but he still acknowledges that, like, yeah, you could have, like, maybe spent more time with me. Like, that's... And there's just, like, they work together. He cares about him, right? He cares about him enough to want to go rescue him, to like, you know, save his life, to work together. They don't hate each other. It's just he has these sort of pent-up things from his childhood. And he gets to actually tell them to his dad. And they have, like, a development there. There's that scene where his dad thinks that Indy's dead. And he's like, oh, God. And, like, turns out he's not dead, but he has that moment, right? I like it's like a fake-out death, but it's not a fake-out death to fake out the audience. It's to fake out the character. Like, the audience, like, there's, like, 30 minutes left in the movie, right? Like, he's not dead. But it's important that, like, the character has that. It's important that Henry Jones Sr. has that moment. Because it makes him appreciate, oh my God, you know, like... Because he's just been rationalizing it in his head about why it was okay that, you know, he didn't spend a lot of time with his son. And now that he's lost him, he's like, oh, fuck, it's, like, real now. It's real for a second. And when he comes back, it's like, okay. And then by the relationship by the end of the movie, you could see, like, how they've changed. Their relationship has been kind of healed a little bit. They're not completely different people, right? But you can see how their relationship has improved. And that's really nice. It's a really nice little character arc for the both of them. This one's probably it feels like the best parts of the first two movies. Last Crusade feels like the best parts of the first two movies in terms of, like, the tone. It's got some kind of dark stuff, but more on the level of, it doesn't go as hard as Temple of Doom. It goes about as hard as Last Crusade. Sorry, as Raiders of the Lost Ark. With, like, yeah, there's some kind of intense, grim stuff. Obviously, with, like, the Nazi turning into, like, a skeleton and shit. Like, that's pretty dark, right? But it's not, like, so... it's enough that, like, a kid could understand it. I remember as a kid thinking, like, oh, that was really neat. It was actually really neat, like, thematically. I wasn't thinking it exactly like this. I wasn't that smart as a kid. But, like, I love that scene. Actually, I remember that whole sequence when they get into the actual cave with, like, the 3 trials to get to the Holy Grail, right? I remember that whole sequence from when I first watched it as a kid. Because it's so, I don't know, I think it's so well done. It's such, like, it's such a perfect, like, true climax. I love the fact that the twist that, like, the Nazi... guy. No, he's not a Nazi. He's the American guy who's just allied with the Nazis. Nazi lady picks out, he's like, what cup would Christ have drank from? And because he's so single-minded on the goal, when the Nazi lady, you can tell she intentionally did it. She picked out the wrong cup. But when she picks out this ornate golden chalice, right, you can tell he looks at it, and he's so focused on the goal. He's so focused on the goal that he doesn't even think about the meaning of the cup, right? Like, this is a religious artifact that Jesus Christ drank out of. He has such little, like, understanding or care for any of the context behind that item that he just sees, like, oh, Jesus, yeah, God, Son of God, oh, beautiful ornate cup, of course. It's almost like, sometimes I would walk into churches and I'd see these gigantic frescoes on the walls and these stained glass things, and I think how funny it is and how ironic it is that, like, Jesus was such a lowly person in society. He was a carpenter, and he lived so meekly and modestly, and he lived amongst people who also did, and that's who he congregated and hung around with, was these people who lived in such a modest way. Not really by choice, but by his choice, but he, for himself. And then you walk in, you see these fucking insane Jesus super god shrouded in gold and sunlight, and you're like, this feels kind of ironic. This feels kind of like in 40K. I'm gonna make a Warhammer reference. That should be a new bingo card item. It feels like in 40K, where like the whole irony of like the Imperium of Man is that the Emperor hated religion, and then once he was now that he's like a skeleton in a chair, he's literally like a deity to the whole Imperium. That feels like that they recognize him as some kind of like golden god, but he's just a skeleton in a chair and who hated religion. Like that kind of irony, I don't know, it kind of that whole sequence in the Grail room reminds me of that. And then Indy looks at the cups and he picks out the one, this modest little ceramic cup, and he says, that's the cup of a carpenter, and that's the real cup. I don't know, I thought that was great. That whole like, it's such like a well executed I think, like, not just... What's neat about it is that where I think the Lost Ark itself in that movie is, like, it's just kind of the MacGuffin box that, like, kills the Nazis when they look inside of it. They didn't respect its power or whatever. They wanted to misuse its power. In Last Crusade, the item feels like you can tell the MacGuffin, the Holy Grail, it's not just like a meaningless item. They actually work it into the plot in a way where you can actually see the difference between Indiana Jones and the villains, right? Like, he's going for the Grail so that he could save his dad who just got shot. That's what he wants to do. He's doing it out of like a selfless act. He doesn't really care about eternal life like the traitor American guy does. He's just doing it. He's doing it out of like for a noble cause, which is like much closer to like the message of Jesus who drank out of a cup, and it's like using the MacGuffin as like not just. It's not even fair to even call it a MacGuffin, because the MacGuffin is almost like it wouldn't even matter. It almost sort of doesn't even matter what the thing is. I feel like when you call it a MacGuffin. But it's actually used for thematic purposes, and I think that's neat. Other things that I like about Last Crusade, I think it's got great pacing. It has some of the most fun, just like moment to moment stuff. Like we're going here, then we're going here, then we're going here. In cool locations, we're going all around. We go to Venice, we go to Berlin. We're at like an old German castle with like Nazi science stuff going on. And of course we go to like the Middle East, I think. I forget exactly. They name a bunch of cities. I don't remember exactly where they are, but the Middle East. My American is showing. Yeah. It's like, I don't know. It's probably my favorite. Like if I had to rewatch any of them, it would probably be that one. Indiana Jones, great movies. Will I be interested in the fifth one that's coming out? Probably not, because I don't really care to watch an aging... Harrison Ford was arguably too old in Crystal Skull, dude. He was arguably too old there. I really don't care to watch him in The Dial of Destiny, unless I hear it's really good. Maybe it'll be really good, and then I'll check it out. I think Kat said she wants to watch it because it's like the latest Jackass movie, where part of the fun for her is like is like wondering how close these old men got to breaking a hip. Yeah, but it was a good time. Good time all around.